August 12th, 1983. This is Joe Todd, an interview with Mrs. Opal Dargon, D-A-R-G-O-N. Mrs. Dargon, where were you born?
In Beggs, Oklahoma.
And when's your birthday?
September 21st, 1960.
Who was your father?
Charles Wesley Long.
Where was he from?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. And who was your mother?
Alma Owens Long. And she also was from Mississippi.
Okay. What kind of work did your father do?
Early years he worked on the railroad. Later years he was an oil lease broker.
When did your parents come to Oklahoma?
It must have been around 1905, 1906.
Did they say why they came here?
No, they didn't.
Do you have any childhood memories of Beggs?
No.
So you were about 4 years old when you came to Tulsa.
Right.
Do you know how come your folks moved to Tulsa?
Well, mother was prepared to teach, and she did get a teaching position here in an elementary school, Dunbar, and they came for that. And of course, Dad was with the railroad, and he was moving in and out, so it gave her that opportunity.
What's your first memories of Tulsa?
Two very separate parts. North of Archer was where all of the blacks lived, and of course south of Archer were the whites. The dusty streets, the muddy streets, and the hot summer days.
Were the streets paved then?
No. There was streetcars downtown, and the parts of downtown that had any paving, it was bricks, paved with bricks. And those are the first memories. Well, part of them were with me sitting on the front porch and reading to the little kids in the neighborhood. I read before I went to school. And reading to the kids in the neighborhoods all of the fairy stories and the kinds of things that I liked.
Did your mother teach you to read?
I don't really remember. All I remember is I was reading. And I assume she helped.
Yeah. Can you describe what your house looked like? What kind of house did you
A
live
little, they called it a shotgun house, a little 3-room house. Each room was one behind the other.
in? Where is it located?
On Seminole Street, what is Seminole Street now? Here in Tulsa.
Where'd you start school?
Dunbar.
Dunbar. What was your teacher's name?
Nettie Hughes, and the next year I had Jane A. Johnson.
Of course, Dunbar was an all-black school.
Right.
Okay. Black teachers?
Right.
What kind of games you play in school?
Oh, I always played teacher. When we got there and there was recess time, I was playing teacher. We played tag. We do some relays or tug of war.
Was there any organized activities to support the war effort in World War One in your school?
Well, I don't
1917.
really know. Oh, you mean World War II?
No, World War One, 1917, 1918.
No, I don't know. I don't remember that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that's right. You still been in Beggs at that time.
Right.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. What's your favorite childhood memory?
Favorite childhood memory. Maybe it was going fishing with a neighbor, because I still like to fish today because of those. My mother and father didn't go, and one of the neighbors would go and would ask Mom if I could go, and that was always fun. They'd take a big picnic lunch, and they'd fix me up a hook and a pole, and that the joy of that, and that developed into one of my hobbies, which is out of doors, and we still go fishing today.
Where'd you go fishing back then?
Would you believe that back there then, we went out to what is now about 46 and North Lewis. And I believe they call it Rock Creek. It runs through there and on around here. We fished out there. Then we'd go out to Bird Creek. And one of the favorite memories of fishing was going up to Spavinaw.
Up to the lake?
Uh-huh.
When did they build that lake?
I don't know, but it was back there evidently in the 20s, early 20s, that we hooked on to it. But I'm not sure of the date.
Can you tell me about the big race riot here in Tulsa?
I can tell you from my experience. We first became aware at our house of it when cars, not only cars, but people walking were coming from toward the downtown area out our way, and there were just streams of them coming. We could see the fires, the smoke from the fires, and the people who were coming were bringing the news of what was happening. At that time, we didn't know why it started or where it had started, but we knew there was conflict. And I had measles at that time, and my dad was home, and so was Mother. And Dad had to carry me, and Mother took a little black suitcase with some clean clothes in it for me, and some sort of medication. I don't know what kind it was. And we were just about a block, where we lived was about a block from the Midland Valley Railroad track. And we went down to the track, and they walked down to the track, and as near as I can figure out now, they went to what is perhaps maybe 61st Street North, down the railroad tracks. This was from down near, well, let's see, we were about 1700 block north. From there out to about 61st Street down that railroad track. And I remember seeing, well, as we were going, we were fairly slow because Dad was carrying me, and people were coming by us running. Then you'd look back, or you could catch up with some people who were going with their possessions tied up in a sheet or a bedspread, and they'd have it on their head, or they'd have it tied on their back, and holding the hands of youngsters who could walk, that kind of thing. But everybody was going, trying to get out of town. that was fairly early in the morning on that 1st of June. And I don't remember how long it took us to get that far out. But then runners came and caught up with the people who were walking along, and as far back as we could look, we'd see more people coming, just droves of them coming. Runners came and said, this must have been during the afternoon, fairly early in the afternoon, that the National Guard had come and that they were rounding up all of the men and were taking them somewhere, and they were leaving the women and the children. Well, by the time we had gone that far, Mom and Dad were tired, and I think I was hungry, and Dad decided he would come back. He wanted to see whether the house had been damaged or anything. He didn't want to leave us out there. So we turned around with a small group of people, and there was a black doctor who lived on, well, he had lived about 5 blocks from us. He lived on Madison and what is Virgin now. And he had a 2-story house with a basement underneath. And we came back that far. He had been a family doctor. And we came back that far and got in his basement. Well, before we had gotten to his house, the National Guard had come around. That may be chilly on your head. Had come around, and they picked Dad up. We didn't know where he was going. Later we found there were 2 places. I think one was the fairground and one was the old convention hall, I believe. But they took the men there. We didn't know when we would see him again or anything, and we stayed in the basement of Dr. Key's house for 2 or 3 hours maybe, and it was getting close to dark. And as I said, his house was just about 4 or 5 blocks from where we were, from our house. And so Mama said, well, I'm going to take you on home. I was fretful, and she said, I'll take you home and maybe you'll feel a little bit better there. And so Mom picked me up, picked the suitcase both up, and took me on home. I was an only child. Took me on home. When we got there, the front door and the back door had been broken in. And at that time, many of the people had mattresses on their beds that were made out of feathers. And the people who had broken in had gone through everything. We didn't have much for them to take anything. There wasn't anything there they wanted. But they had set the mattress on fire. Well, it was in a cotton ticking, and it had burned through the ticking, but the feathers smothered the fire out. So except for the house being all tumbled up, there was no other loss other than that. And Mama got me bedded down, and she started to try to clean up. And it was the next day before my dad got back home, before they released him. Of course, we had seen much. We could tell there was a lot of destruction because of all of the smoke and the fires, and some of the places around us had burned also. But it was much later before we heard anything about why or what had started it. And while things quieted down, and I don't remember how long the National Guard stayed or anything, but I do know that our church, the one that we had attended, had been down on Greenwood, and they had not been in the church very long. It had been, by that I mean that it had been completed very recently. But it was burned to where there was nothing left but the basement of the church. And all of what we had called deep greenwood from Archer back there, all of that was just really a shambles. And those are my memories of the ride.
What did you hear caused the riot?
Big part.
What was the reason for the riot that you heard later on?
A black man had ridden an elevator where there was a white woman elevator operator, and she said that he had insulted her or attempted to molest her or something, and it went on from that. Only that didn't seem to be, well, years later we found that didn't seem to be the total story or the real story. It was unfortunate. We lived through it. But I think each side meaning both the blacks and the whites, didn't want to experience it again. There were a number of black deaths, but I understand there were a number of white deaths too. And
any idea how many deaths there were?
you've heard. I've heard estimates from, say, the 30 to 50 on up to 300 or 400, which I do not believe there were that many.
How long did that riot last?
Just that one day, and then there were a few isolated incidences the next day or so. And of course, tension was great for quite a while, but folks started to try to pick up the pieces and go along.
Did the National Guard patrol the streets? Did you talk to any of them?
No.
Yeah. Okay. You go through high school?
Yeah, I went through high school here at Old Booker T. It's gone now. When I went through school here, we did not have a black junior high school, so I went from Dunbar 6th grade to 7th grade at Old Booker T. And then from 7th through 12th grade at Booker T. Washington High School.
What year did you graduate?
1933.
1933. What was it like being a child in the 20s? Besides the riot?
Well, it was fun. I can remember the first radio I heard. It was a crystal set that a neighbor had built himself, and he had to put the earphones on. And as I remember now, it seems as if my eyes must have been as big as saucers as I stood there and listened. But we did a lot of reading back during, say, from 29, when the Depression really got bad and the things crashed and all. My dad would go to the used bookstore, and he could get used magazines, 2 for a nickel. And he would bring those used magazines home, and I would read those. Most of the time, as I remember, they were the outdoor magazines like Field and Stream. I don't remember what that was the name, but I remember reading the African, the stories of safaris to Africa where people went hunting, and it was always interesting. But he kept something there for us to read, for me to read, and he would read. Sometimes Mom would read those, and then we would talk about them over the dinner table. We didn't have the radio at that time, and I learned to sew early. I wanted to play a piano, and we didn't have the money to buy a piano. And there was a lovely old man here. He was black. He was a math teacher. His last name was Mitchell, and everybody called him Dad Mitchell. He also played piano, and he played violin. Well, my folks could get a violin for me, so instead of my learning to play the piano, I took the violin lessons. He charged, I think, something like 25 cents a lesson, and you'd go on Saturday. And I took violin lessons for around 7 or 8 years. So there was practice on that. As I said, I learned to embroidery and to sew, and Mom did have a sewing machine. So I would do that. I'd get to go with the neighbors fishing in the summer, and we were kept busy with any number of things. And I don't ever remember being bored. Never. Mama's bed was high, and I can remember on some of the hot summer days, after I had done whatever chores Mama gave me to do, I had to hang up the tea towels on the clothesline or things like that. I'd have to wash the dishes. I would find one of those magazines or get a book, and I'd crawl under the bed. It was cool under there. And I'd crawl under the bed and read. And Mom wouldn't bother me under there. I don't know whether she really didn't know I was under there or what, but she wouldn't bother me under there, and I'd get to read under there. But
how did the Depression affect you and your family?
oh, well, there were many things that we did not have, but you know, somehow, if there was one cookie, it was divided 3 ways between the 3 of us. And somehow there was love and concern, and you did not feel insecure. So that, sure, I knew there were things I didn't have, and I had some patched dresses and things, but they were always clean. And if you didn't have enough to eat, you didn't go around broadcasting it. You held your head up and went on and prayed that the next day there would be enough to eat. So we were just a typical family, but we didn't gripe about it. We were doing the best we could. And Mom and Dad would have a garden, and that would help, particularly during the summer. We knew it was tough, and I was talking with somebody the other day when I finished high school. A friend of ours, I had the second highest average in that class, and I was supposed to do one of the addresses for the class, and a friend gave me a hand-me-down white dress, and I think we found some shoes for 50 cents, white shoes, and that was what I had. But I was just as proud of that as if I had paid that $100 and some that folks are paying for shoes now.
What'd you talk about at the address?
It was more or less a recognition of the teachers and the help that they had given, and the support for parents and friends. Sort of a thank you from them, and an expression of a determination on the part of the kids who were in the class to try to go ahead and be the best that we could be in whatever we chose to be. And this was the kind of thing that was projected.
Was it kind of a valedictorian address then at the school?
No, they called it the salutatorian. The valedictorian beat me by a half of a point. So,
After high school, what'd you do?
I worked 2 years. As I told you, I had learned to sew when I was real young. I got work in a decorating studio, and I worked 2 years for $5 a week. It was really about 2.5 years, and saved part of that $5 a week. And after 2.5 years, I went to school, to college. Went up to Pittsburgh, Kansas. It was Kansas State Teachers College then. But I went up there and to school. And
What'd you study in college?
at first I studied home economics, because again, sewing was a part of my talent, and I enjoyed it. And I took home ec. Was up there until 1936. I had appendicitis and had to have emergency surgery, and didn't finish that year out. And then in 37 I ran off and got married, and went back to school after I got married.
Where'd you meet your husband?
Here.
Here.
Here in town. He had been in school when I went to high school. He had been in school there and was one of the football stars and the basketball stars and all of that, but I didn't pay that much attention to him. I just remembered his name. And then after I had gone to Pittsburgh and had come back because of that surgery, met him again. And
What's his name?
Theodore Dargon.
You went back to Pittsburgh after you were married? Did he go with you?
No. No, somebody had to make the money then.
Yeah.
And he was working at, when he first worked at Tulsa Club, and then he moved from there out to Southern Hills, when Southern Hills.
What kind of work did he do?
He was working in the men's locker room at Southern Hills. And after I finished at Pittsburgh, I came back. Well, before I finished at Pittsburgh in 1938, let's see, 37 we got married. In 38, our son was born. And then I went back to Pittsburgh and finished. And when I came back from Pittsburgh after having finished, he started taking plumbing course by correspondence. And of course he ended up passing the state plumbing license and the local one, and he ended up as a plumbing contractor. And I finally got work here. We had a daughter then, and then I finally got work here in the school system, and I taught here 35 years.
What'd you teach?
I taught first grade for 20 years, and in the meantime I kept going to school and got a reading specialist certificate, and that's what I was doing in junior high school for the last 15 years, was a reading specialist.
Where'd you teach?
I taught at Old Booker T. They finally changed the name to Charles S. Johnson Elementary School, and that was to separate it from Booker T. Washington High School. And then I was there when they changed the name from Booker T. Elementary to Charles S. Johnson Elementary. And then the last 15 years that I worked, I went to Anderson Junior High as a reading specialist. We were beginning to get a number of kids into junior high school who were not reading on junior high school level, and for various reasons. And that was my work with them. In the meantime, some of those years with moonlighting, I worked at Tulsa University in the reading clinic to help as I worked on toward a master's degree.
And are you retired now?
Yeah.
What year did you retire?
Let's see, I quit 4 years ago. Yeah, I quit 4 years ago. 82 would have been my year to retire.
Yeah.
But I had a turkey for a principal and we couldn't get around him, so I said, I'm going home. I'd had 35 years teaching, I couldn't come home, see.
Mm-hmm.
So,
How did the education system change from the time you started teaching to the time you stopped?
oh, many, many changes. In the early days, when it was separate and unequal, even the monies came separately. And we had enough money for all the supplies that we needed for our kids. Parents had different attitudes about their kids. They were concerned about their learning, and they also were concerned about the discipline, and they gave the teachers the privilege of doing whatever they needed to do to keep the youngsters moving on. They had a respect for the teachers, and the kids were taught respect for the teachers. There were some times when the problems that were sent to the teachers were a little bit overwhelming. I can remember one youngster who would get sick every day just before lunchtime, because we had to take the first graders into lunch. I have had to teach some of them to use a fork and a spoon to eat with too. But this one youngster would get sick every day when I'd take them up to the bathroom so they'd wash their hands before they'd go to lunch. And up until that time, she would be just into everything, and then she'd get sick all at once. And finally, I contacted her parents, and she had been a finicky eater all of her life. The parents had kept telling her, that's all right, when you get to that school, that teacher's going to make you eat everything on your plate. So see, she was having a psychological something there happening. Well, when we found that out, we had to work a different way with her, and we finally got her to where she would eat what she wanted. And with the cafeteria style, she had a choice of foods too, so she could choose some of the things that she wanted. And then when she did eat, she was rewarded. Her parents were cooperative enough to send extra money so that if she did eat, she could have the ice cream or a little bowl of Jell-O or some of the things that she did like. And we finally got her to eating like that. There are a
Who
lot of other things happened that.
Who was your best student in your years of teaching? The most outstanding student?
Ah, there are several of them now. One is works here for IBM. He had been over Urban League, and then he left the Urban League and went to IBM. And I don't know exactly. He's in management with IBM locally here. I have another youngster whose mother is Japanese, and her father is a black American. He met her when he was in Japan in the army, and she has grown up. She has a master's degree in business administration, and she has worked for an oil company in New York, and she is in Ohio at the present time she's working with the state of Ohio in something about economic development at the present time. Those are two that just come to mind immediately. There are several who are now doctors and lawyers. One is a corporate lawyer back here in Tulsa now. There's one who was just a little rascal, and he learned to play football well and got a football scholarship to one of the state universities. But that summer that he would have gone to school as a freshman, he was working out here at Sand Springs somewhere, and he got entangled with a conveyor belt some sort of way and lost one of his arms. But I think I'll always remember him because he was a little devilish rascal. And I remember one day I sent him in the cloakroom. I couldn't take him another minute. He was meddling everybody around him. And I sent him in there and let him calm down and whatnot. And when I went in there to follow up and told him, I just can't love you when you act like you did today. And he looked up, big tears streaming out of his eyes. And he said, but Miss Dargon, I still love you. I'll never forget him. There have been any number of them through the years that you remember. After integration, that was a hard time. Here they integrated teachers first, and then they integrated students. And I was out at Anderson when that integration of the students came. And those were hard times. Those first students really had a hard time. And Anderson
Where were you teaching at that time?
I was teaching at Anderson Junior High, and it had been a black school in a black neighborhood. And they bussed the white students in. And would you like some more?
No, thank you.
It was rough on those kids because those white kids particularly, didn't know anything about Anderson School. They hadn't even known there was such a school. It was completely out of their neighborhood and all. And they were hostile because they were afraid. They didn't know what to expect. And there weren't too many incidences, black and white. There weren't too many of that kind. But the kids were just on their guard. They didn't know what to expect from one day to the other, whether it's all sugar and pie now and tomorrow it's going to fall down around our heads or what. And I can remember one little white boy that I had he was in the room because he was reading way below his grade level, and he was just going, I guess he was about 13, and he was trying to find out who he was and why he was here and all of these things. And my classes were necessarily small because they had such a discrepancy in what they needed and what they knew. And we would work with them, but I found that I could not work with kids, I don't care what they look like, where they came from. I couldn't work around them daily without learning to find something about them I could love and appreciate. And I would worry with him and worry with him, along with some others. But he stands out until he would do something that I just couldn't tolerate any longer, and I would send him out. Well, when I send him out, he's supposed to go to the counselor. And I didn't have to send many of them out. Sometimes I just get them out of the room and say, stand in the hall, and I'll be out there in a minute. And get them away from the other kids. And go out there and talk with them for a few minutes, and they could come on back in. And I had done that a number of times with him, and I try to talk to him and tell him, you know, I'm here to help you. And unless you open up and let me help you, I'm just knocking at a closed door. But the time will come when you will maybe understand what I'm trying to do for you and with you. Well, we worked with him. He was back in the room because he didn't make that much progress the first year there. The next year he was back in, and it was the same old thing. You'd have to put him out every so often, and then they'd keep him out that day. And they knew if I sent him out, don't send him right back to me today. You can send him back tomorrow, but don't send him back today. Well, he left Anderson, and supposedly, he got into some other difficulty at Anderson, and they suspended him, and he went to another school, another junior high school. About 3 years ago, I was running for Votech School Board. I had quit and was running for Votech School Board, and I went out to this North Votech campus. I was standing there waiting for, I can't remember what I was waiting for now. And who should be coming down the hall but him. And I said, hi there, don't I know you? He looked up at me, and then the biggest grin came across his face, and he came with his hand out and said, Miss Dargon, he said, no, I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm taking auto mechanics. Can you believe it? He said, I have thought about you a many a time and the things you used to try to tell me. He said, I went to the Navy and I couldn't make it in there, and I was back out on the street, so I decided I'd come out here and see what I could get out here. And I'm going to stick with it this time, he said. So that was a joy to see him, see how much he had progressed, and the fact that he was realizing he had to learn to do something if he was going to make something of himself. So every once in a while you run into young people. Sometimes when my husband and I are out, and we'll run into somebody I haven't seen in a long time, and usually it's one of the young men, and he's way up here over me, and he'll say, you're Miss Dargon, aren't you? And I look at him and say, did I teach you? But they make themselves known, and that's always fun to see them again and find what they're doing now and what they have done.
What was when they first started integrating the schools, what was the biggest problem you faced?
Attitudes. negative attitudes, and I think many of them were because there had been no contacts between families of the different races.
Is this on both sides?
Yeah, both sides. Both sides.
How could it have been handled? Could it have been handled better than the way it was?
Frankly, I don't see how it could have, unless the pattern of living had been such that there was contact before. See, I had always thought within myself, if living was open and all kinds of peoples lived in the same neighborhoods, they would learn to tolerate one another. They would learn a lot of things about one another. They would learn that we are far more alike than we are different. And also, that would not have necessitated all of the busing.
When you first came to Tulsa, were you allowed to go in all the stores downtown?
No. That was the reason that the black merchants who had the stores on Greenwood were so successful, was that we could not go in all of the stores.
Was there any incidents where people tried to go in?
Yeah. I can remember when Vanderverse, and this was, must have been the late 40s, because I was teaching at that time, and I started teaching in 44. Vanderverse had advertised a fashion show in the newspaper, and we took the newspaper to read. There were about 6 or 8 of us who were teaching went down to go to the fashion show. That might have been in the 50s even. And they would not let us in. Of course, by that time, we could go in the stores and we could purchase things by that time, but they would not let us come in and share in that fashion show that they were going to have. There were times when you took the children down to downtown with you, and you had to make sure you had gone by the railroad station in the colored section and used the bathroom then before you went on up Main Street, because there was no place up Main Street where you could take a youngster who needed to go to the bathroom. Not even in Crescents. And it was in the 50s. No, it was in the 60s when we used some of the teenage kids as well as some of the adults and went down to integrate the lunch counters and the bathrooms and you name it at Cresses and Woolsworth down on Main Street and whatnot. At that time, the store that's Dillard's now was a Brown Duncan, and they finally fixed up a bathroom way back around all of the boxes and you name it in the basement that they would give the blacks the directions to get to. And I can remember one time taking my daughter down there, and I don't remember what we were going to buy, whether it was shoes for her or what. But But anyway, she wanted to go to the bathroom, and we were up on about the second or third floor, and they were telling me that I said that we would have to. I said, with this one up here we going, or you gonna clean it up out the floor here? And we went on in. But those were just isolated incidents. Normally, you didn't want to face all of the hassle. But, yeah, we've been through all of that.
Can you tell me the organized activities you had during World War II to support the war activities in the school system?
Oh, let's see, what did we do? We had kids saving by war bonds, the 1250 ones. They could save through the school. What else did we do? Some of the organizations did things for little projects for the Red Cross. That was like bringing toothpaste and toothbrushes and funny books and stuff like that they would send to various places.
Did you do any work outside the school system for the war effort?
No, not for the war effort. We had payroll deduction for war bonds.
Yeah.
But not outside the school.
Did you know your grandparents? The Civil Rights Act of 1964?
54 and 63.
63?
I think so.
Yeah, 63, 64. That was... Did that
I
have...
don't remember because that didn't affect us. We didn't have.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask if there was any effect on Tulsa.
No.
Yeah.
We've gone to 9th grade at a junior high school. They opened Carver as the first black junior high school, but they had only 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
Then the next year they added 9th grade, but I was going to 10th grade. So I did not get to go to the junior high school, although I was there when George Washington Carver came for the dedication. I was standing out there watching.
Did you get to meet him?
Yes.
What was he like?
He was humble. He was quiet. Of course, we had been schooled on all of his abilities and his creativity and all of that, so we were much in awe of him. But just to look at him, you wouldn't have known he knew a thing. But I was impressed by his quietness and the genuine warmth that he showed when you did get to meet him.
Did he give a talk or a speech?
A brief one, yes.
What did he talk about?
He talked about using the things that you had to develop things out of it. He was more or less showing us what he had done and where he had come from, and that if you had if you worked at it, you could do similar things. He talked a little bit about all of the things that he had done with the peanut. He had done something with the sweet potato, and these were things that were available. And he talked about the things in nature that one sees and how one ought to appreciate it.
What year was that?
That must have been something like
Is there still much racial prejudice in Tulsa?
Yeah, but it's underground now.
Yep.
We've come a long, long way, but you do find it. It's subtle, and some people don't think they are prejudiced. They really don't. But certain things that they say kind of shows up in it. Meet others who will ask you, do you know Sam Jones? Sam Jones was one of the best friends I had. But Sam Jones, he was in and out of our house. Okay, Sam Jones worked for that family. He came in the back door every time he came in, and Sam Jones never got an opportunity to sit in that living room as a visitor. See? But when they start that, they can name one black, and they know him real well, and they tell you how long they've known him and all. So they haven't bestirred themselves to find and know anybody else other than Sam Jones. And yeah, there's a lot of it here, but as I say, it's sort of underground, and in some instances, it's very subtle. In some instances, I really think they are sincere when they think they don't have it. But I can't point a finger at the whites always, because I find that blacks have prejudices too, but they don't want to admit it. I guess nobody does.
Well, I found that everybody is prejudiced about something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We used to have a running joke. They would, and you've heard it too, where they would say, all blacks look alike. And then, here not too many years ago, in one of the psychology classes, there was an article that we did, and we found that the Japanese said all other people look alike to them. The Chinese said all other people. The Indians said all other people. So we all have it. I mean, that's just a normal, everyday occurrence between all peoples. I belong to a number. I have been involved in a number of things, and I find just one or two casual meetings, I can't really go back and put faces with names. Maybe the name will stick in my mind, but the face that goes with it won't. And then after several meetings, then I can identify the people with the names. But yeah, I think racism is alive and well, even though it's underground. Yeah.
You say your father worked for the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
What did he do for the railroad?
He was a Pullman porter.
How long did he work for?
I am not sure. It must have been 8 or 10 years.
Which railroad?
I don't know, but he ran from Chicago out west, because he used to talk about Seattle and Spokane and Portland, Oregon, and so he ran out that way. He never talked about the East.
Then he worked as an oil lease broker. Who did he work for? Did he work
He
for
was
himself?
independent.
Okay.
At that time, there were 4 blacks here in Tulsa and 1 in Muskogee who were independent oil lease brokers. And
What did he do as an oil lease broker? What was his?
okay, he made contacts with the owners of the land to see if they were willing to lease it, and then he acted as contact with the oil companies who were interested in leasing to drill for oil and whatnot. And he was was that in-between man.
Did you ever meet anyone that had come to Oklahoma with Mr. McCabe, E.P. McCabe?
No, not that I know of.
Well, I'm trying to think what else we can talk about. Tell us what are you doing nowadays?
Well, I was elected to the silver-haired legislature as a member of the House of Representatives. And I'm sure you're aware of what that was. It is where we represent the senior citizens of the state and keep in touch with their needs and bring that to the attention of the regular legislature. I was named Teacher of the Year for the Tulsa Public Schools in '75. That was before I retired. I have worked with Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry from the 60s when they first made a bid to integrate
The 11 o'clock hour on Sunday morning?
That's the various churches usually have the morning service. And where one would think that integration could be fostered and promoted and encouraged through the churches, it has not been. They have been some of the last folks to break down there or open their doors. I started working with them. They were council of churches then. Since that time, progress has been made where we changed the name from Council of Churches to Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, and we did it because we were the first city in the United States where the Catholic community joined with the Protestant community in the council. We have Jewish members in it now, and as long as it was called the Council of Churches, they did not belong. So we changed the name to Metropolitan Ministry, and all of those I have worked with that through the years and in various capacities.
What are the main activities of them?
First thing, it's fosters dialogue between all of these denominations. And secondly, as of now, the Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry does a catalog of needs every quarter. And this comes from the member churches and from the economic situation that we find, as well as social situations that we find prevalent here in town. And through all of these things that need help, for instance, right through now, much of the catalog of needs centers around people who need jobs, families who need help, organizations who are set up to help in the community who could use extra help, that kind of thing. Then that catalog of need is given to are sent to all of the churches in town, and they can read through and decide which one of these projects we would like to take on, or we would like to join with another church, and let's work together on this project. And from that, we have had food drives that would benefit Neighbor for Neighbor, which is a non-government help for people on the north side. We have Western Neighbors on the west side. We have Project Get Together on the south side. And we have Neighbors along the line, along the Sand Springs line. Um, we have, during the time when the Cambodian refugees were coming in, we had, through this particular work of TMM, we had a refugee resettlement task force that worked. We did have a Black Community Issues Task Force, and that was going when we had had several incidences of police brutality when they had to come to some altercation in the Black community. And we have worked with the community treatment centers, and they also worked with the city and county jail people until we have a jail ministry where the inmates can have access to counsel of a minister, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of things that have been done through Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. When Black Fox was going, one of the things was to try to acquaint the people of the community with both sides of that issue. Right now, we are concerned with the utilities and the increased rates at which people have to pay for utilities. And we're doing studies on that. So we're involved with the community as a whole. I'm on the Governor's Advisory Committee on Aging. And I work specifically on a subcommittee that is concerned with long-term care for the aging across the state. What else am I doing? Oh, I'm a Gilly at Gilcrease Museum. That is, well, it isn't necessarily a women's group because there are some men who are Gillies, but we are a service organization. They are volunteer at Gilcrease, and I have been in research on the research committee, but next year I'll be sponsor of the school slides, where we take the Gilcrease preview slides into the schools for 5th and 6th graders who are studying Oklahoma history, and we give them a preview of what's available in the museum before the teachers schedule visits to the museum. So I'm working with that. I'm on the board of elder care, and at the present time we have a sort of an ad hoc committee that is policy options in transportation for older people in town. They have difficulty getting out and getting to and from places, although there are several organizations that are in the transportation business. The old people having difficulty. For instance, right now, our Metropolitan Transit Authority, the drivers are threatening strike, and they're in negotiations because the drivers don't want to see the old people who ride the bus or the minibus or whatever it is. Don't want to see them to their door with their packages or help them from their door to the bus. They don't want to do that. So that's one of the bones of contention right now. This committee is studying all of the forms of transportation that are available to see how the service can be coordinated. Because we find some of the old people who say have an appointment with the doctor, and they do the same thing some of us do when we are booking airline passage, and we know airlines overbook and we may be left on standby. They will book with 2 or 3 of the transportation people, and then all of them show up and they can go only with one. See? So we're trying to come up with some options whereby we can give good service, and yet it will be economically a sound proposition where those who are providers will have their fair share, and yet the old people can be served as they are needed. So there are a lot of things going on, and I guess being nosy, I stuck my nose in a bunch of them.
I'd like to get your ideas on the United States today. How do you feel about the U.S.?
Some days I'm very disturbed. Some days I'm awful proud to be a citizen with the advantages that I have. And I think the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. But I am disturbed when I think in terms of what I perceive is that the president has surrounded himself with moneyed people. And there are people who evidently have grown up with money, and they just don't know how the other half lives. They really aren't aware of what's happening on the other side of the tracks. They can't relate to it. And that disturbs me. That disturbs me very much. So I guess I can say I'm patriotic. I am happy to be an American. I'm happy to live here. But I'm also concerned because there's another side, and I don't think the other side is being addressed.
Okay, Mrs. Dargon, I want to thank you.